Great. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the City of Wildwood's Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of November 2nd, 2020. This meeting is being held live for people in attendance and also via our Zoom webinar platform. The information is on the agenda, and I guess we'll get started. I'll do a roll call of commission members. Mr. Newberry.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Here.
Commissioner Levitt. Here. Commissioner Cohn.
Here.
Commissioner Broyles.
Here.
Commissioner Beatty.
Here.
Commissioner Depler.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Chair Lee.
Present.
Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Mayor Boland.
Here.
Councilmember Brost.
Thank you. On tonight's agenda, we have our public comment session. There are no public hearing items. For old business, we have a letter of recommendation and 2 information reports. And under new business, we have a request on a telecommunications tower, and then a second request on an existing telecommunications tower. Moving on, we can approve the minutes from October 19th. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes or modification? Councilman Brost.
Second.
Yeah, motion to approve.
Second from Elizabeth, Commissioner Broyles. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Looks like we're good, Mr. Newberry. Moving on, does the department have any opening remarks?
No, sir, but thank you for asking.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bunich. Moving on to old business, we have letter of recommendation, PZ 12-20. Mr. Newberry, are you reading or is Mr. Bunich?
Mr. Chair, could we do public participation first, sir?
Oh, sure. Let's go. We'll go back and do the public comment session. Do we have anybody online?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, we'll start with those in attendance here at City Hall. And I will give the instruction if anybody is attending online via Zoom, they would use the raise hand feature and we'll get you into the queue to comment. The first person in attendance here at City Hall is Mr. Tremaine.
Mr. Newberry, why don't you skip him and come back?
Mr. Bosworth.
Mr. Bosworth, the podium is yours.
Unmuted. Okay.
It's all yours. Go ahead.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Tony Bosworth, Ward 8. I also own a property that is adjacent to the proposed new fire station at 18304 Wild Horse Creek Road. I own the property at 18301 Wild Horse Creek Road. And I viewed my concerns previously at the meeting 2 weeks ago. And I want to reiterate them again. And a couple things I wanted to further point out. One, the impact on my property is pretty severe, potentially for a lot of reasons, being a firehouse. Number 2, I bought as an investment property, and it may be difficult with renters to have a property with a firehouse right across the street. And further, there are items that are not sorted yet, specifically to my knowledge, at least in the report that's printed for tonight's meeting, that the traffic signal has not been determined to be needed or not needed yet, and reserves the right to install a flashing light or otherwise traffic signal in front of the property, which again would impact my property right across the street. And as I previously pointed out, there was purported in September to be a ISO report, which was going to delineate the benefits of this site versus the previous site and the impact, et cetera, et cetera. I did 2 days last week at rush hour go by the property, sat in my driveway, then also sat at the BP station, and there was stacking for almost a quarter mile on Thursday and just under a half a mile on Friday. And actually one of the Chesterfield police officers got a call that was stacking in the line and had to go out of the line into oncoming traffic going west to go west on Highway 109 for a call going down 109, or sorry, west on Wildwood Creek to go on a call down 109. And there was no stacking traffic going east out of the existing fire station site. And had they been going west or south on 109, they would not have had any traffic impedance from making the service to those directions. In addition, I have spoken to two appraisers. I can engage them to get an impact of value, but the general discussion was the property's worth $188,000 per an appraisal I got last November, and that the fire station going across there could have an impact of $20,000 to $50,000 on my property. So, and I mentioned in the previous meeting that the impact to the adjacent properties has already occurred since the 70s when the previous fire station was installed. So there's no impact on those properties if the station was to be rebuilt in its current location, which I understand from, again, the September meeting that the improvements would fit on that site. So I understand the architect's comments about better utilities, et cetera, et cetera. But for instance, the sewer that would be installed will not be a public sewer as referenced in the drawings, but a forced main to a public sewer along the right of way of Wild Horse Creek Road to the east from the new site at 18304. So I said, I don't see a whole lot of benefits to me, and I don't understand the improvements for the service to the community by relocating the property at 18304 versus its current location west of Highway 109. That's basically a summary of my comments other than what's in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bosworth. Mr. Newberry.
Miss Allen? Thank you.
Hi. Told you I'd see you in a couple of weeks. And I have something that may be helpful to you, actually. This actually is relevant to the special overlay district. It's not going to be convoluted, but it's going to be a little in depth. And I hope you find it interesting. I certainly did. So I'm saying to myself, what do I even bother coming here for? You know, what is the point? Do I really care about these people? I don't know them. They don't affect my life. They have nothing to do with me. You know, what do I care if they move into a Superfund site or they move next door to a Superfund site? And so I'm trying to talk myself into being involved in this or to not being involved. And then I realized that as a physician, my job is to prevent disease whenever possible, because prevention is preferable to cure. And I'm looking around today and I'm just kind of learning and exploring things. And I realize that not only am I a physician in the city of Wildwood, but I am one of 35,000 plus bosses to you. That made me feel pretty powerful. And in the same state of the city of Wildwood from April 24th of 2017, the mayor said a very interesting thing to me, and I spent quite a bit of time learning what he was talking about. And I want to read it to you. I'm fairly organized, but not terribly. We should not forget the great and many things we have learned and will continue to learn from our past, while at the same time, always being mindful that we really only have one choice as to how we govern, and that is forward-looking with a view to the common good of the whole of our city. So I'm like, well, that must be something important because he wrote it in his yearly report. What does common good mean? And then I went and I looked and I thought about it, and he was really talking to me and talking to every person that is a citizen of Wildwood, because common good is only through the participation of citizens in the political community that we can achieve the common good of community safety. So that is my job, and it's the job of everyone that is a citizen in the city of Wildwood. So then I knew that Mary Morton was looking around for another term that she found in the SCODE, the Special Circumstance Overlay District. And that was general welfare. Well, in the very first sentence of the ordinance 2569, they put that the city has the constitutional charter authority to promote the health, the safety, and the general welfare of citizens of the city of Wildwood. So then I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? What is the general welfare? It's good enough to be put in the first sentence of the Special Circumstance Overlay District. What the heck does it mean? General welfare is the concern of the government, that's you guys, for the health, peace, morality, and safety of its citizens. It is mentioned in the preamble. It is the reason that the Constitution was created. So I know you're wondering, why am I telling you all of this? Should a builder propose development on the Callahan site, which, by the way, the sale was called off because somebody paid their bills for them, so it didn't sell, thank goodness, on the courthouse steps. But should this happen, the concepts that we just discussed are going to be really important for you as P&Z to keep in mind, because your only objective is to provide for the general welfare of the citizens. My job is to participate in the common good of the citizens of this city. So that's why I'm here every Monday night now for who knows how long. By the way, if you don't have a full copy of the EPA's State of the Bliss site, I'd be happy to give you my email. I'll leave it with Travis, and I'd be happy to send you a PDF. It's 500 pages, but it's very well laid out. So you can go to a subheading of what may interest you and learn about this site. And this is a health risk assessment that was put out by the EPA in June. I myself recommend going to the list of chemicals that are on the site in areas and in levels that are too high for human safety. And you can look at their associated cancers or non-cancerous diseases. Don't read it before you go to bed. So let's see. I have one more thing to say if I can find it here. So as the P&Z on this SCODE, this Special Circumstances Overlay District, you are going to be the ones that are going to be asked to credential the people that would be working on the site and the criteria for the site assessment. This is very clearly laid out in the expansion of this code that we have helped the council with, and we're working very closely to make sure that these things are there for you, because you can't be expected to know what the criteria is for somebody to come and work on a Superfund site. I mean, you know, maybe if you're an environmental specialist, but I don't think any of you are. So it's there for you. It's listed out. It's in black and white. It's very simple. It's step 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we will make sure that you have the best information to make the most intelligent decisions that give the greatest protection to the citizens of Wildwood. See you in a couple weeks.
Mr. Newberry.
Next speaker card is from Chief Cruz.
Good evening. My name is
Sure.
Assistant Chief Cruz with the Monarch Fire Protection District. Mayor Boland, Planning and Zoning Commission Chairman Lee, and members of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to address the commission this evening about the new engine house 2 at 18304 Wild Horse Creek Road. I'd just like to state a couple facts with some of the things that have been said over the last several meetings and some of the concerns that have been raised about the various issues of the development of this engine house. In the 50-year history of the current engine house 2 located at 18424 Wild Horse Creek Road, the district has never received any complaints about any issue, in particular noise generated by the crews or the apparatuses stationed there. In fact, the daily routine of fire district on the 18304 property site would actually be in line with a family of 4, in particular with respect to activity of noise, use of artificial lighting around the building at night. At the site of our future Station 2, the design would ensure that the lights, sound, and activity would not impose on our neighbors and their adjoining properties. The fire district and our design team have met with one concerned neighbor no less than 5 times and have modified the design for Engine House 2 at the 18304 site in direct response to their requests by that neighbor, including modifying the pavement, the retaining walls, and how the building would be placed on the site. The design for our future House 2 was unanimously given approval by the Wildwood Architectural Review Board. And what's more, the Wildwood Architectural Review Board gave compliments to the district and our design team for a model presentation. Similarly, the Wildwood Planning Department, Director Joe Bunich and Planner Travis Newberry have given us compliments to the district and the design team for being willing to provide information and consider requests by our neighbors and the commission, which developers often balk at and sometimes refuse. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate your consideration on this project. Thank you.
Mr. Newberry.
Mr. Chair, I believe we'll try Mr. Tremaine again, if he's available to speak.
Good evening. My name is Eric Tremaine, Ward 1, live in the Etherton Valley subdivision, very close to the proposed fire station, 433 Etherton Valley Road. What I would like to encourage you all to do, if you haven't already done so, is drive by the current fire station and then drive by the address that we're talking about tonight. The first thing that will probably come to you is, why are they moving to this new address? There is no good reason. The old address is used in about 1/3 of its acreage. The other 2/3 remain empty, vacant, and able to be used. Why now do they need to move to a bigger site? There are all kinds of configurations that could be put in on the present site, and they would work as well. I don't think the purpose of Wildwood is to allow the Monarch Fire District to simply build a Taj Mahal fire station. They can get out of the present property all they need. They don't have to move to the new one, which was, until they started tearing it up, a house on 3 acres and was just like the rest of the area there. The problem with that house is the person who wanted to sell it had it up for sale 2 or 3 different times. It didn't sell. Well, somehow he found the fire district and got it sold that way. And I'm pretty sure it's sold because it's all torn up. Pieces of the roof are out and other pieces of the building have been torn away as the fire district, I guess, uses it as an experimental house for training or something. At any rate, it's not just the fact that it doesn't fit that part of the neighborhood. It's not just the fact that it's not needed because they have a property that would take care of all of their requirements. It is the fact that it's a dangerous thing to do at that new place. And that's because it sits on not just Wild Horse Creek Road, but Etherton Road. We call it Old Etherton. It's about 1.5 lanes wide. Trucks go off there constantly because they're too wide to navigate it when another car is coming the other way. The city of Wildwood has recently repaired and replaced, I should say, a bridge on the southern part of Etherton, made it very wide. 2 fire trucks could pass there. The problem is the bridge is made very high, and when any vehicle hits it at any kind of speed, they're going to be airborne. There are 3 blind corners, 2 blind hills on that road. It's 1.5 lanes wide. It cannot handle the traffic of any fire trucks. So what's the alternative? The alternative is go to east or to the west on Wild Horse Creek Road. If you're trying to get into most of the places that this firehouse will serve in the fire district, you're going to have to go down south on 109. To get there is to turn out of the new fire station, go west to 109. Currently, they would turn out of the current fire station and go east to 109, and it's much quicker. It's not nearly as far. Furthermore, it has about 10% of the traffic, because anyone who has experienced that area will realize when you go down Wild Horse Creek Road, either to the east or to the west of 109, the traffic is to the east. To the west is very little traffic because it's more rural. Most of the traffic that comes from the east on Wild Horse Creek Road is going to turn left or right, going south on 109 or north down into the valley. That's where the traffic is. To put a fire station where the traffic is means much slower response times. It makes no sense. To leave it where it is means faster response times, shorter distance to 109 and no traffic. To go down Etherton is an accident waiting to happen. The road won't handle a fire truck. The bridges will launch it into the air. Neighbors will get run over. You will have probably a fatality. There's no sense to spend a whole lot of money on a Taj Mahal fire station when the one they have now, perhaps if they want to change that, they can. It'll do just fine. In the meantime, why waste money on something that will be much more dangerous, with response times being much poorer and probably getting somebody killed on Etherton? I hope you reconsider and do not allow it. Thank you.
Mr. Newberry, is there anybody online?
Yes, sir. Kathy's helping me out and letting in Gene Milner.
Go ahead, Mr. or Miss Milner. The podium's yours.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jean Milner, and I have the privilege of serving on the Board of Directors of the Monarch Fire Protection District. I would like to thank Mayor Boland, Chairperson Lee, and members of the Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission for allowing me to address you this evening regarding the future site of Monarch Station House 2 at 18304 Wild Horse Creek. I will keep my remarks brief. Monarch is dedicated to continuing to provide the highest level of emergency services to our constituents living in Wildwood. Our long-range plan included the construction of a new state-of-the-art facility to replace Station 2. The current site on which House 2 currently sits is simply too small to adequately house today's larger apparatus, both fire trucks and ambulances. Earlier this year, the residents of Monarch overwhelmingly passed Proposition F, enabling us to set this plan in motion. Passage of a bond issue in these uncertain times is a clear affirmation of your support for the district and its mission to deliver the life and property-saving services your community deserves. Monarch has a proven track record of being good neighbors. The landscaping of our properties is professionally designed and maintained. Our buildings are kept meticulously clean inside and out. We are acutely aware that while firehouses operate on a 24/7 schedule, our neighbors do not. For that reason, it is district policy to keep noise and light to the most minimal levels in the overnight hours. It is not Monarch's desire to unduly disrupt the lives of our neighbors when responding to an emergency call. There are times, however, that lights and sirens are used to let drivers and pedestrians know that they need to remain alert for their safety. We recently reviewed our 2019 call log and found that of the 507 calls answered from House 2, only 170 occurred between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. That is an average of just over 3 overnight calls per week, while in actuality, some months had as few as 6 total overnight calls. Finally, I would like to assure you that it is Monarch's intent to continue to be the good neighbors that you have come to trust and depend on when you or a family member has an emergency. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Newberry.
Mr. Chair, it looks like we have one more raised hand on Zoom. Ms. Loja.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm the neighbor to the south of the proposed Monarch fire station. I've talked a few times and met with a few of you in person, and I wanted to say thank you so much for meeting with me and hearing me talk every meeting. And thank you for your consideration with the Monarch fire station. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm online and listening and hope that you guys make the right decision for all of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newberry, anybody else?
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any other raised hands on Zoom, and I have no more speaker cards for folks who are in attendance here at City Hall.
Shall we wait a minute?
Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't mind, let's just give those that are attending via Zoom one last opportunity. Mr. Newberry, anybody?
No, sir. I'm not seeing any other raised hands on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we can proceed.
Okay. Moving on to old business. Mr. Newberry, will you read PZ 20-12 or 12-20? Sorry about that.
I will be reading that one for the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, sir. Pardon me. PZ 12-20, Mary Cook, 2031 Joe's Way, Wildwood, Missouri, 63005. Caro Straight Up Solar, 11696 Lilburn Park Road, St. Louis, Missouri, 63146. A request for a conditional use permit in the NU non-urban resident district, street address 2031 Joe's Way, locator number 20U 530040. For the installation of roof-mounted solar panels, which are to be so situated on the dwelling and accessory garage, or structure garage, as to be visible from the adjoining roadway. The request is to review to be reviewed in accordance with Chapter 415.090 NU Non-Urban District Regulations of the City of Wildwood Zoning Code, which establishes standards and requirements for the installation of solar panels. The requested permit is required due to the panels' placement on the front-facing area of the roofs of the dwelling and accessory structure which abut a private roadway. This particular subject site is located in Ward 2.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open this up for discussion, and Mayor Boland, you had your hand raised.
Just a point of information. Did we approve, we may have done this and I have forgotten by now, but did we approve the minutes from our last meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have a brief presentation before we would open it up for comments from the commission or action.
Okay. Mr. Newberry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The department is prepared for your consideration tonight the draft letter of recommendation for a requested conditional use permit for the solar panels as described in the item that was read into the record by Mr. Vunich. At its October 19, 2020 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission, by a vote of 9-1, voted to grant the conditional use permit, which again includes solar panels that are placed on a dwelling and accessory structure so as to be visible from the street. With that action, the department is presenting tonight a draft letter recommendation that reflects that action. And with that, the department will conclude. And if there are any questions, Mr. Vunich and I are available for those. And I would also note that the petitioner's representative is in attendance tonight as well.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. I'll open the floor up for discussion or entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Beatty has a motion, a second with Commissioner Levitt. If there's no discussion, we'll go for a roll call vote. Mr. Newberry.
Commissioner Cohn.
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles.
Yes.
Commissioner Beatty.
Yes.
Commissioner Depler.
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Yes.
Commissioner Levitt.
Yes.
Chair Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Brost.
Yes.
And Mayor Boland.
Before I vote, I just have one question. Joe, is it the case that these panels, once completed, are not visible to neighbors or the roadway?
Given the development pattern on Joe's Way and the location of the panels relative to the dwelling and accessory structure, and a fairly heavy tree line along Joe's Way between the panels and the nearest neighbor, I wouldn't guarantee that they'll be completely invisible, but I do believe that they will not have an impact.
So when you say they will not be completely invisible, what is your reservation there?
I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a reservation, Mr. Mayor. It's just that where the driveway is located, it breaks that tree line along the edge of the private roadway. And so when you drive past that entry into the lot itself, I think there'll be a split second or two where you might be able to see the panels. But again, beyond this particular location is 2 telecommunications tower, an emergency access into Will's Trace for the Monarch Fire Protection District, and then Miss Cuba's property. So all in all, I think it is a very low impact application.
And my recollection is we had no nearby neighbors who were opposed to this. Is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, we had several submit either comments over our website or attend the public hearing in support.
Okay, thank you. I'll vote yes.
Okay. Passes. Moving on. Mr. Newberry, are you reading PZ 11-20?
Yes, sir. Give me a moment. Thank you.
Sure.
PZ 11-20 Monarch Fire Protection District, care of FGM Architects, Inc., 1 Metropolitan Square, Suite 1945, St. Louis, Missouri, 63102. A request for a conditional use permit in the NU Non-Urban Residence District for a 3-acre tract of land that is located on the south side of Wild Horse Creek Road at its intersection with Etherton Road. Street address is 18304 Wild Horse Creek Road and 18304 Wild Horse Creek Road, Unit A, St. Louis County, locator numbers 19W510215 and 19W510194. Proposed use, a new fire station with living quarters and associated parking areas. Public sanitary sewer service is planned to be extended to the site. Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Department of Planning has prepared for your consideration tonight its information report with recommendation. That report was first published 2 weeks ago when this matter was to be considered for its first time by the members of the commission. As the commission members will recall, at that October 19th meeting, a motion was made, seconded, and supported to delay action to date certain, which is tonight, so as the Monarch Fire Protection District could provide additional information in response to certain questions raised by the commission members. The department provided a cover memo on its information report on Friday, identifying those 5 items that it believed the commission members were seeking from the fire district. First thing this morning, today, Monday, the architect representing the fire district provided a packet of information in response to those 5 items. And with the permission of the chair, I would like just to go through and highlight those so that there's clarity on what was provided and the direction that was given to the fire district by the Department of Planning. First and foremost, there was a question that was raised by the commission relative to any statistical evidence or other data that would indicate why this particular site was chosen and not a expansion or reworking of the current site. What, in I think common terms, made this site better than the other current location? In response to that, the petitioner's architect has provided a memorandum, a letter, in which there are a number of justifications or rationales relating to that particular question that was raised. Thereafter, there was a request to better understand the development patterns around both the new site there at Wild Horse Creek Road and Etherton Road and the old site on Wild Horse Creek Road west of State Route 109. The petitioner's representative, the architect, provided 4 sheets. Those 4 sheets reflect the existing site and the radiuses at 1,000 and 3,000 feet from the site, and then again the new site with the same radiuses, 1,000 and 3,000 feet. The next request was for a coverage map of the Monarch Fire Protection District, which has been provided. And as you can see from that coverage map, I believe there are 5 service areas within the overall boundary and a corresponding number of fire station or firehouses to serve those sub areas. Next, Ms. Helfrey asked that the redesigned sketch plans or concept plans for the new site be provided. Those were inadvertently not included in the October 19th information report. They were forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission the next day, October 20th. and they are part of the packet of information tonight. The final item related to the creek that's on the property, the subject property that extends to the south and to a certain degree parallels Etherton Road down toward Bottom Creek, which is at the base of Orville Road and Etherton Road. The department intends to address the stormwater management and the creek protection measures as part of its recommendation. That is the information that the department believed the Planning and Zoning Commission was seeking. The department does appreciate the architect for the petitioner providing that information, and hopefully all of you have had time to study it as best as possible over the course of today. Acknowledging that additional information, the department has prepared its recommendation report in this regard, and the department's recommendation is favorable toward granting the conditional use permit at this location. In the report, the department provides background information relating to this particular site. First and foremost, it describes the lot's characteristics, the surrounding roadway system and its characteristics as well. Then the property's physical features, whether it be the woodlands that define much of the southern half of the property, the creek that has been identified by Ms. Broyles, and the current location of the dwelling and the turf area associated with it. Thereafter, the report then describes the surrounding land use pattern in association with this subject site, both in all compass directions. And so from that, it's clear to see that the predominant pattern in this area is residential and includes large lots and single-family dwellings. Thereafter, the department in its report attempts to provide the detailed explanation of the major components of the building and the site design itself. And so as part of that, the department identifies the size of the building, its height, the area of the site, the preservations associated with the woodland areas, the provision of stormwater management facilities, and improvement of utilities itself to the property. Thereafter, and the part that probably is most important to the Planning and Zoning Commission, is the analysis. In the analysis the department has prepared for the Planning and Zoning Commission, it does note that the master plan anticipates conditional uses of this nature. And in fact, in certain elements of the master plan, identifies priorities for maintaining high quality fire, EMS, and police services throughout the community. As you know, the city of Wildwood has done much to improve police services over the course of the past 25 years, again, consistent with the master plan. And in this particular case, the department felt that the fire district, by providing a new facility that will be multi-generational, will accommodate the future growth of this area, as well as raise protection levels for surrounding residents within this particular sub-area of service. The master plan has a number of items that are applicable to this particular site and design. They include the environmental element, the planning element, the community services element, and others. The department would note that in its analysis, the master plan does seem to support the use of certain properties in the NU non-urban residential area for certain activities such as this. Thereafter, the zoning ordinance becomes the guide for the department's final analysis of this particular request. As you know, there are 4 requirements that must be studied by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and those 4 areas must be positive if a favorable recommendation is to be made and the granting of the permit considered. As you know, they relate to good planning practice, impact on surrounding land uses in the non-NU non-urban resident district, visual compatibility, and then finally, the benefit to the community overall. In the report, the department goes through each of those 4 major items and provides an explanation under each of them. I think it's important to note that with the redesign, the applicant is exceeding all components of the tree preservation and restoration code in terms of preservation of the woodland areas that again define much of the southern portion of the site. It's also important to note that the development footprint, that being the building and the parking lot, all are contained within approximately 1 acre of the overall 3-acre site. Again, very consistent with the minimal use of properties for development purposes. I would also note that the revised site design eliminates access to Etherton Road, thereby addressing any concerns about the circulation and the staging of vehicles into and out of the site on what can be best classified as a rural street. Along with the revised site design, there have been steps made by the applicant to better screen the common area at the back of the station between the nearest neighbor. Those steps include a reduction in the retaining wall, the installation of a fence or a screen, the reduction in the light pole height, the integration of the outdoor lighting requirements of the city in the design of the lighting plan, and many other steps. The department would note that also the parking area has been moved to the east side, closer to Etherton Road versus a residential property to the west. Therefore, what limited activity there is with the public visiting the site and the employees is now focused more toward Wild Horse Creek Road and Etherton Road versus a residential property line. All in all, the department has identified what it believes are many components of the design that are consistent with good planning practice, will not impact surrounding uses more so than, let's say, any other fire station in a rural setting, and can be integrated into the site with a visual consistency. And as is mentioned, and I believe the board member did a very good job of describing this, the intent is to improve services, to ensure those services are improved and stay consistent well into the future, and that residents of the Monarch Fire Protection District are assured of quality service for a long time to come. Finally, attachment B has all the specifics associated with the design and operation of the site. I would note that at this stage, the department is prohibiting any type of siren or other kind of noise producing an item on Wild Horse Creek Road. So as again, we're trying to manage as best as possible any problems or any characteristics that may be associated with a facility of this nature. The department believes that attachment B, if adhered to by the petitioner, will integrate the site into the area with the minimum amount of impact, a key characteristic, again, of a conditional use permit process. With that, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department will conclude. And after the floor is open for discussion or a motion made, the Department of Planning will be available to answer any questions regarding its report and recommendation, and then take direction from there. Thank you for your attention as always. And Mr. Chair, the department has concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open up for discussion or a motion, and Mayor Bowen, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few questions, and I don't know if we still have representatives from the district with us, but if so, these might be more appropriately addressed to them. Just for clarity, these are just items I want to get clarification on.
So, Mr. Chair, through you to the mayor, the The two representatives from the fire district are in attendance, as well as the architect that's represented the district from the onset. With the chair's permission, I'll ask the Josh Mandel, the architect, to come forward. I think he knows the site and site design components better than most.
Hey, Mayor Boland, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. So first of all, before I ask my questions, I just want to say that I really appreciate the representatives being here this evening and the additional information that they've provided. And I just want you as representatives of the district to know that you know, my questions previously and this evening relate to balancing what, you know, it appears you're wanting to do here with the interests of our residents. And I just want you to know that I greatly appreciate all that you do as a district for the residents of Wildwood. With that said, one of the questions I have, and some of these, like maybe a majority of these, relate to the issue of the proposed site versus your existing site. And one of the things that I've heard several times from people is that the plans that you're proposing for approval to us this evening and previously were actually originally planned for the current site that is west of 109. And I would just like to know, is that true or false?
And with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'll have Mr. Mandel come to the microphone. And
Yes,
then he can
please.
answer the first of the questions.
Good evening. And yeah, I'd be happy to answer your question, Mayor and Commissioners. The design that you see this evening, and I'm assuming all of you have received the letter that Mr. Vunich referenced and had a chance to look at it. But contained within that letter, that memorandum, are several exhibits. One of the exhibits is the request for the new fire station plan and the new pavement design that circles that provides vehicular traffic access on that site as designed for 18304 Wild Horse Creek, superimposed on the 18424 Wild Horse Creek site. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen rather than the camera. But you have a graphic exhibit that should show the new design and the existing 18424 Wild Horse Creek site. So that is first part of the answer to your question, Mayor. The other part is that, yes, initially there was an attempt to design a facility for construction on this site. And sort of cutting to the chase, you see the size programmed and planned for new relative to the property boundaries in yellow and the setback lines in red on the existing 18424 Wild Horse Creek site. And if I did not answer adequately, I'd be happy to expound.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just ask a follow-up to that.
Mayor Boland.
Thank you. So just for clarification, the drawing that we just saw that superimposed the proposed building and parking spaces and so forth on the current site, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So is that drawing something that came after, you know, at a later point in time, after other, you know, after discussions occurred within the district as to, you know, other larger things that it may have wanted? In other words, was there an original plan for the expansion of the firehouse in any form, whether it's what you just showed us or not, for the existing site?
Yes, there were prior versions of the plan developed during the course of Proposition F, which was the proposition that the fire district passed in June of this year. That was a delayed vote, right? So the preparation for that in the fall of 2019, there were plans developed in response to dialogue between the architects, engineers, and the district personnel.
Okay, and have we seen those plans?
I don't know that those were ever submitted in response to any of this effort, because this was in support of the CUP petition for 18304 Wild Horse, but I know that those were in the public domain during the Proposition F.
Okay, fair enough. And then related to this original site, Mr. Tremaine, Wildwood resident, spoke earlier, and he made a statement that the proposal does not utilize I believe he said 2/3 of the land that is currently owned at the original site. Is that true or false?
I heard him say 1/3 of the existing site,
Okay,
but I would say that 1/3 is patently false, 2/3 may be closer to accurate. That site is approximately 1.8 acres. The existing building, I obviously obscured it with this exhibit. I don't know if I have the aerial, but it's accessible. If you look at a satellite image on the internet, you can see the approximate use of that site. And I'd say it's probably closer to 2/3 in terms of both pavement and structure. So impervious imposition on that site.
So you're saying as to the site where I may be confused here, as to the current site that you're utilizing west of 109, or you're only utilizing 2/3 of it? Is that what you're saying?
No, I wouldn't say that. First off, I'd say that existing structure and existing pavement on existing 18424 Wild Horse Creek is probably, I'd ballpark closer to 2/3 of the site, but the site is completely taken up if you then add in other features, well, septic, and so forth. So the site is much more densely occupied than even 2/3 if you take all the encumbrances on it by virtue of the structure being there. So the structure itself and the pavement is probably roughly 2/3, but with the septic system and other elements that support the building being there, it's much greater than 2/3. Does that address your question?
I think so. And I'm not saying, I mean, we don't tell the district what to do. I'm just trying to get my hands around how we sort of got to this point. And so, Joe, one question I have relative to the other 1/3 of that property, and to the representative's point about septic systems and so forth, if hypothetically, I'm just saying hypothetically, the district utilized that existing site and needed to get permission, variances or what have you for septic systems and so forth to utilize the remaining 1/3 within the scope of the boundaries of the property, is it the case that that would or would not be possible?
Well, certainly, I think the city can accommodate a lot of variations to its standard regulations, but I think at the end of the day, the one component that precludes any type of reduction is the fact that the groundwater well has a 100-foot radius around it from the edge of any portion of the septic system. That 100-foot radius around the groundwater well is kind of protected area from a lot of different perspectives. And so, as you can see on what I would consider a somewhat narrow site, but with some depth, protecting that 100-foot radius, when you take into account the septic system and drain field that's associated with it, then the impervious surface and the runoff from that, it's a tight fit. And certainly we have on very few occasions worked with that 100-foot radius, but it's been in some of the most dire circumstances where the property couldn't be used for its intended purpose.
Are they currently, with respect to the well vis-a-vis the septic system, in contravention of that 100-foot radius?
I don't know that to answer it. I would defer to the architect. What I would probably tell you is the well was installed many, many years ago. And at that time, the 100-foot radius from the head of the well may not have been the standard, but it is now.
And again, not to drill down on this, but since we're already to this point, I have to ask this question. Would it be possible to move the well somewhere else on the property to avoid the 100-foot contravention?
And I think that's a perfect question for the architect. And again, if there is an action tonight on this, certainly between now and the next meeting in 2 weeks, the architect could maybe lay out those improvements on the existing site just to give a perspective better than what I probably have described.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry.
Can I add to that topic though? I think even before we would get to analysis, a further analysis of well and a further analysis of septic system on the existing, the 18424 site, one of the complications, and I think that exhibit, whether you have it up in front of you or not, it's very telling, the sheer size that is programmed, in other words, the needed size for a new facility on the existing site plus pavement overwhelms the buildable area. So irrespective to placement of well versus building and placement of well versus septic and vice versa, there really is a very difficult time fitting the planned design both within the red boundaries again, which are the setback, and fitting the building and the pavement design as is required for a loop drive, a drive-through facility onto that site. So I would add that the complexity of that analysis may be superseded, or the process of that analysis of well, septic, and structure may really be superseded by the sheer size of the building and the ability to place this on the site.
And again, I appreciate that information. Just looking at your drawing there, one thing occurred to me. It appeared that, and again, these are things that the district, I'm sure you've looked at, but that drawing, it looked to me like the parking places that are on the west side, if the city granted a variance on the east side for a large part of that setback, and to give you a variance for that, you would be able to get your parking spaces and the drive-through that you were discussing. But that's for another day. I just have, and I don't want to monopolize the time here, I just have one last question. And that is, in the material that you sent to the city that we received today, I noticed one of the things in the report was that I think the statement was that the proposed location at Etherton and Wild Horse Creek was one of the sites that were considered based on the criteria that you all have developed. Were there other sites? And if so, what were those other sites?
There were other sites. I don't know if I'm at liberty to divulge what all the district looked at. I know that they were publicly listed pieces of property, and they may still very well be available. I'd rather defer to the district to identify those sites if that's something that they're comfortable to, in doing. They were sites in the vicinity of where the existing house is, sort of with the same logic of a move further east. Again, Mayor, I assume you're referring to the commentary about the attempt to grow the existing site size to accommodate the new plan. And then when that really was not viable by virtue of neighbors not really agreeing to sell property or consider selling property, the district looked to purchase other property. And so they examined within a certain reasonable range, let's say on Wild Horse Creek, so that they would be able to provide really the same sort of service out of a similar location. But I don't know if that's my place to identify those other sites.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for your answers. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I have one additional question, if you would. Seems like the main reason for the requested relocation is utilities. How far, and I may have missed this in the report, but how far are the utilities from the existing station? Water? and
They
sewer.
vary, but they're roughly 1,000 feet to the east, give or take. Water, I think, is a little closer, and sewer is a little further, but they're all roughly 1,000 feet. I think it's Canyon Forest on the north side of Wild Horse Creek is where the sewer extends to, and I think water extends to the property one east of the property immediately adjacent to Etherton. But it's roughly 1,000 feet east.
Has the fire department ever considered extending water to the facility?
One thing that I would, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to provide a response to your first statement. The driver primarily was space and size in order to build the facility that they had designed. It wasn't necessarily utilities only as a driver, but utilities were available by virtue of moving further east. And in some of the analysis that I provided in response to the questions from the 19th, the idea was that in terms of building on that existing site, the building that they had planned really would not fit. But by moving east, there were some synergies by virtue of having access then to utilities. Water, we looked at very early on. Sewer was not going to be an option. And so take that out of order. Neither gas nor sewer was going to be available to the fire district at the 18424 site. We looked at water and it was technically feasible, but cost prohibitive. So that really was not practical. So they would be needing a new well at the existing 18424 site in order to build a new facility there.
Okay, and then going back to the site plan, the building setback line seems like that would fit fairly easily. As far as roads and access, I mean, you can be outside of the building setback for a road. I mean, that would be something that could be easily granted through staff or through the city. So looking at the plan, I think that this fits. So you're shaving a couple of feet here or there, and I'm questioning that logic as to why that wouldn't work.
Can I ask to review the exhibit one more time? Because although I can't really point to it and sketch on it, I'll kind of approach this from a different angle. So you see the white footprint of fire engine house and then the gray pavement around it, providing that loop drive. You would need approximately 1/3 to maybe 40% of the site area within that yellow boundary. Well, let's say more within the red boundary. I don't believe it extends to the yellow. So you'd need approximately 40% of that red boundary area again for a septic field. Then the septic system that is upstream of the septic field, the drain field, and then the well. So I don't necessarily agree that what you see here can be made to fit, because there are components that are not impervious structure or impervious pavement, which are not really represented here. In other words, if we showed the true footprint of this facility on the 18424 site, which was not really the request, but I just want to try to talk through what would be on this exhibit. If we showed the septic system in its entirety and we showed the well impact, as Mr. Vunich was trying to address earlier, I think it would, essentially we'd be drawing a much larger boundary than that existing yellow outline. And since sewer is not available west of 109, and since a new well would be required, if I were to redraw this exhibit, in other words, in response to your inquiry, I think we'd be showing the necessary footprint far exceeding the yellow boundary, the property line. So I don't know that we necessarily could construct this design on this site. In fact, I'd go so far as to say we could not construct this design on this site, even if a variance was granted and even if we were to go to zero lot line. I think we would have a very, very difficult, if not impossible, time fitting the necessary septic sanitary system and well, in addition to what you see drawn on the screen.
So a force main could possibly be an answer for that. And that's done typically when you're at a lower elevation than the sanitary, if you pump that uphill. So I think you could probably work through this if you had, the time to do it. And I understand the larger site issue, but I just want, propose those questions. Commissioner Broyles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Vunich about the creek. I need a little more clarification that the creek that is located on the new site that we're talking about, the newer site, that creek bed is going to be protected, and that you mentioned that it does drain onto Etherton Road or under Etherton Road and onto Bontom Creek. Where is Chalks Creek?
Ox Creek is further to the east, relatively speaking, almost at this location, this far north in the city of Wildwood. Cox Creek is more up by Kerrs Mill Road and Strecker Road, whereas this is at obviously Etherton Road and Wild Horse Creek Road. So there's a pretty substantial distance between the two main channels of the creeks.
So this creek bed that we're looking at the south end of the new proposed location is just a tributary into Bonham Creek?
Yes,
that
ma'am. Further south, Bonham Creek, for just general purposes, trends in a west to east direction. It's at the location of the new bridge that's been identified on Etherton Road, and it drains to an easterly direction behind Pine Creek subdivision, Wilderness Trails. It works its way through the Wild Horse subdivision and ultimately then gets into the Chesterfield Valley area in the city of Chesterfield.
Do we have a guarantee that that creek bed behind the proposed site is not going to be damaged or compromised in this structure?
Well, I think from the perspective of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District and the city of Wildwood, those guarantees cannot be made. But as mentioned at the beginning of the department's presentation, the department feels comfortable that we've learned a great deal about creek erosion and steps to arrest it as best as possible over the last 18 months through our task force. First and foremost, the safety net that is there is the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. With the district making the decision to have sanitary sewer service from it, it also now must comply with all stormwater management regulations. And as we found, their new regulations are some of the most comprehensive in the country. And if designed, engineered, and installed correctly and maintained, do a very good job of managing channel protection, flood mitigation, and water quality. Secondly, and above that safety net is the city of Wildwood requirements relative to tree preservation, the grading code, and just again, the prohibition that any more than 1 acre of this overall site be utilized. By that, we are preserving, for all intents and purposes, a approximately 2 acre area in a pervious condition versus an impervious condition. And as I mentioned, our tree preservation code protects the woodland areas to the south. And with the cooperation of the district, we've really reduced the extent of pavement on site by this redesign. And that goes a long way to minimizing the amount or volume of runoff. And then we have the bioretention to hold it and to discharge it at a rate well below the current condition, the pre-development condition. This is something we talked about at the reserve here in Town Center. And I think Mr. Stock, Stock and Associates, did a nice job of explaining how that works.
And furthermore, the 4, I don't know if you can see this, those are the 4 that we were given after our meeting last time. And the one I'm looking at is number 2, the living quarters on the east side with the loop drive. Is that available to pull up, Travis? Yes, that one. I believe that's it.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make a comment, or maybe 2 comments, about the traffic on Wild Horse Creek. There are no shoulders on that road where if a emergency vehicle needed to exit immediately, there's no place for traffic to go, either east or west. And there's no center lanes to move out of the way of these emergency vehicles. And many of you in attendance have traveled this road many times, and I'm not saying this because I don't think you know that that is the case, but because it is. I think traffic is an issue, and I'd like someone, I don't know who to address this to, about the lights where at Wild Horse Creek, the lights, I know that we have fire stations all over, and there are busy streets in which they exit and enter. But what would be there if we want to mitigate the disruption to residents? I know I heard the sound information, but what are the lights going to be like?
Well, Ms. Broyles, at one of the site visits where the department met with the fire district and Mrs. Loja and her daughter, Mrs. Loja, I believe Chief Cruz did a very good job of explaining that they recognize they're in a rural area, a dark environment, and that the driver of the ambulance fire truck generally at a late night hour won't put on the lights and siren as they leave the facility if there's no traffic. They'll get to where they're going, they'll start, and then if they need to, they would. Now, Chief Cruz is here, and I'm sure he can do a much better job of explaining it than I just did.
Chief Cruz?
Yes, ma'am. I believe what Director Vunich was trying to explain is, are you referring to the emergency lighting on the fire equipment?
No, I am not. I'm talking about on the road or to stop traffic as there is an emergency exit, either east or west. And the only thing I really have to relate that to is we lived west of Highway 109 out in Hawks Rest subdivision. And just to the east of us on Highway 100 was a fairly large fire station. And there was a revolving light, as I recall, that would stop traffic. It was a revolving light, tall light.
We were not planning on any revolving lights directly in front of the engine house. The only traffic lighting that would be put out there would be controlled by MoDOT, who would be the agency having jurisdiction that would make us do that.
Okay, I recall it being a revolving light, but it may have been a stop, a red light as well. But what plan is there to have a light on? Is there a plan to have a light on Wild Horse Creek?
That would strictly be determined by MoDOT. And we do not know if they're going to require us to have that.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Broyles, as part of the site development plan process, if the permit is granted by the city, the Missouri Department of Transportation would have to provide its comments, and we would know before that plan is finally acted upon whether a traffic signal or some type of traffic control would be required at this location.
Point of information.
My one last question, Mr. Mayor, and that is, has the resident that is closest to Mrs. Loge and her daughter, have they been an integral part in discussion with the city and the fire department on coming up with this particular diagram that we're seeing now?
I believe the Chief Cruz has mentioned that they've met at least 5 times with Mrs. Loja and her daughter, Mrs. Loja. The Department of Planning has been to the site twice with the Lojas. So from that perspective, we did try to work with them as closely as possible. We haven't addressed at least one of their concerns about the district closing the doors at the south end of the building at night and not having them open during that period of time. The department just sees that as an enforcement issue that's darn near impossible. And I would note that, again, we're adding a fence on top of a retaining wall, and we believe that'll accommodate much of their concerns.
Would there also be a gate to that private road? I think that was mentioned at one time for the resident in the southern part of not that site, but her land. So people don't drive into their private drive by mistake.
Yes, as part of the conditions in attachment B, a gate system was required of the fire district to avoid those unintended or errant trips onto the residential property.
And if this passes, you feel assured that that particular resident who is most closely connected to that station, that they seem to be in agreement somewhat?
Well, I know the younger Mrs. Loja is on Zoom, and I would probably prefer her to answer that question than I. What I can explain to the commission members is the department's done everything that it believes is reasonable within the confines of the zoning ordinance to protect surrounding residences. Now, again, I'm speaking of Wildwood residences. Mr. Bosworth, who owns property across Wild Horse Creek Road from the subject site, is in the city of Chesterfield. Certainly, I can't impose any requirements in the city of Chesterfield.
Thank you for those answers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Boland.
So Commissioner Levitt has his hand up, and I'm just making a point of information. Actually, it's a question. The chief mentioned relative to Commissioner Broyle's question about the possibility of signal lighting being necessary on Wild Horse Creek Road in regard to the trucks and so forth exiting and entering the building being a MoDOT jurisdictional issue. Is it a MoDOT issue, or is it a St. Louis County issue, or both?
It's actually a MoDOT issue and a city of Wildwood issue. If MoDOT were to require it, the city would then ask that it be shown on all plan sheets from that point forward, and we do our best to ensure that MoDOT's requirements are met, but importantly, ours as well. So we wouldn't just necessarily allow any type of signal structure to be put up there. Like, you know, in town center, we have them painted black, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mr. Chairman, after Commissioner Levitt speaks, I think I may have a motion, but I want to wait and hear what he has to say. Thank you.
Yeah, and then I have a comment after Mr. Levitt as well. Commissioner Levitt.
Thank you. So I just want to point out that another reason we were told that the new site was required was that you could not build a new building on the existing site without tearing down the existing, thereby eliminating local fire coverage to the local area. And so for the increased safety of the local residents, the new location or a new location is preferable.
Councilman Brost.
Yeah, I guess my main concern is that, essentially response time, whether that's a result of a traffic jam on Wild Horse Creek or just basically a longer drive to essentially all of Ward 1, which includes me. So, it does not seem like the traffic issue on Wild Horse Creek it is being addressed or discussed with. And then in general, I really wonder if the chief or someone could address what is going to be the additional response time to residents in Wildwood that do reside west of 109.
The audio in here is not the best, but what I believe I heard from you is what is a reasonable response time? Is that correct?
Well, I mean, well, reasonable would be good, but then also I said additional time
When we look at
for residents west of
response times,
109.
obviously the best case would be for us, we would always like to be there within 4 minutes, but that's not practical with the infrastructure and the road systems that are in place. When we look at response times as far as the Monarch Fire District, and this goes, I think I can speak globally for all of the fire departments that serve the municipality of Wildwood, is 5 road miles from the engine house. And that's not always achieved by the primary fire agency that serves that geographic location. But typically in our area, whether it be us or what we refer to as an automatic aid agency, and in this case, it would either be the Metro West or the Bowles Fire Protection District, which is on Highway T, just west of Austin Fort there. The largest majority of our homes are within that 5 mile area.
So do you have a comment as to, by moving it east of 109, are we adding 5 minutes to response time? Are we theoretically not adding any? I mean, it's further away from, say all the residents of Ward 1, and then the concern with the traffic, it doesn't look like there's any necessary plan for perhaps getting onto Wild Horse Creek and traveling west, which anyone that does it knows it's an issue. So, and again, no shoulders. So, if I'm on that road and you're coming up behind me, I may not have a place to go. So, I mean, has there been any thought on that? And, you could be adding 5 minutes. If your goal is 4 minutes, you could be adding at least 5 minutes to get to my home.
I have not done the exact math, for that, but I'm just going to try to apply just a little basic common sense. Is if we are moving that engine house approximately a half a mile down the road, I don't think an additional 5 minutes is what you're going to be seeing for that travel distance. When we talk about maybe travel restrictions with the motorists that could be on that road, I've looked at that and I've given an honest, hard look, and I'm talking at 40 years of doing this job. If we look to the west or to the left of that left-hand turn, I'm looking at the availability of where will those cars go. And I believe that there's going to be enough room that those cars, once they see that apparatus with the lights on coming that way, is going to make their turns to the right-hand shoulder, and there's plenty of areas that they can get off on that would allow that fire apparatus to get through there.
Okay. Yeah, I guess maybe I'll go back and look. I don't think I've witnessed those shoulders, but I'll go back and look. I accept what you're saying.
Who made it earlier? There are no shoulders. There's some width of that roadway. And again, being in a fire apparatus and watching what the average pedestrian or motorist does, they do look for a way to get off. And if you could just envision that they're both going to flare off to their right hand, that's going to open up that traffic lane that should allow that emergency equipment to run through. Now, having said that, whether we're going west or whether we're going east, that same bottleneck feature is going to be there. We cannot escape that. We cannot escape that. I mean, that's just a natural feature of that road. So whether we're making a left turn or a right turn, going through that traffic, that problem is always going to be existing.
Mr. Vunich, I have a question for you. One thing that bothers me about this whole site selection process on this site itself is that a lot of things are out of order in what should have been done. So if you look at MoDOT's letter, which was dated September 1st, that was based on a plan that had the second access to the site coming off of Old Etherton Road. They have not seen dual entries coming off a Wild Horse. For a road with a posted speed limit of 45 miles per hour, MoDOT might not grant that second access point off of Wild Horse. That would change the whole dynamic of this. I think we need some sort of confirmation that they can actually obtain 2 curb cuts off a Wild Horse, because the dynamic of the whole site development changes significantly without that. Then we're back to where we were with the steep grade, the larger walls, less trees, and we're forced to accept a site with the second access point off Old Etherton. So I'm not sure we have enough information to make a sound decision, because a lot of these pieces have come in at not the right sequence of order for the decision making. So I'd kind of like to open that up for a discussion, see what the rest of the council thinks. Mayor Boland.
So I saw Commissioner Beatty's hand up, but now I see it's off. Before I make a motion, I just wanted to defer to him in case he had something he wanted to say. And I think we have someone at the podium who wanted to mention something there too. So
yeah, we can let the podium.
I'll let the architect at the podium respond before I go.
So I wanted to respond to Chairman Lee's comment. MoDOT has seen the 2 curb cut entry. As you may imagine, they are very methodical in their review, and we have not gotten any objections voiced to us, but we also have not received their revised commitment or approval letter to replace the one that you have seen previously. So to the extent that we're out of sequence, I would counter that we've gone through the motion of reviewing this with the AHJ, as Chief Cruz mentioned, MoDOT, to get their sign off, and we're waiting on the replacement letter that acknowledges that, but they have not voiced any objections or concerns. I think Commissioner Levitt made a point about the replacement of the existing site. Placement of the existing building on the existing site with a new facility would potentially disrupt service. And although it may be a moot point with respect to the conditional use permit that we've petitioned, the existing site, or any site for that matter, with an existing operational fire facility, were it to be essentially replaced in place, it would trigger a phased construction and or temporary facilities to house personnel and apparatus. So the services offered by the district would not be diminished. They would be a challenge for the district personnel to provide. But if there was a replacement in place, it would be a very complex puzzle, but it would be a puzzle where there would be a phased construction. Essentially, you couldn't just wave a wand, eliminate the building and put up the new building. There would be a phased approach to that construction. And that was also part of the commentary provided, that was a cost that they were able to avoid by virtue of building on a new site and then switching over as opposed to replacing in place. Thank you.
Commissioner Beatty.
Yeah, I was basically just going to second Councilman Brost's comments about being concerned about going from one side of 109 to the other, just because having sat through that intersection for most of the last 20 years working in the valley and living in Wildwood, I know I've seen how it backs up every direction except from where their station is now. And even though you have to fight the traffic both directions, it's going from their current site to anywhere north, any direction, is a much easier path during rush hour than trying to exit from Wild Horse. And so I have no objections to rebuilding the fire station. I'm just not a fan of the location at Wild Horse and Etherton.
I'll go back to the podium.
One other factor to weigh in amongst this conversation about traffic on Wild Horse Creek is that there's presently a design being generated by MoDOT, by engineers, for a traffic circle at 109 and Wild Horse Creek and for a widening of Wild Horse Creek. I am not privy to the actual design, other than I know it would be a widening to increase the lane quantity. So that is in the relatively near future for this area. And I think that would have, it's not weighed in on these plans per se, but I think that has a big impact to what we're discussing here.
Mr. Vunich.
I certainly appreciate the concerns about the fire apparatus leaving the site and heading westbound on Wild Horse Creek Road. The department did not ignore that fact, but again, based upon the statistical evidence provided by the fire district, we're talking just over 500 trips per year. So from the standpoint of how often that occurs, again, statistically, the department believes that there's a reasonable there is a reasonable approach to ensuring that this would not necessarily be a problem day in and day out.
Mayor Boland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So listening to the questions and the discussion that we've had, not only this evening, particularly this evening, but also previously, I'm going to make another motion to postpone. It's going to be different substantially than the past, but with all due respect to the fire district, I'm kind of sensing that if we have an up-down vote on this evening, there's a substantial chance that the request may not pass. So I think this is going to help you as much as the residents. And with that in mind, the other thing I want to say more broadly is, and I'm only speaking personally, when I look at these things, I want to do everything I can to accommodate getting you from point A to point B. And yet I also have an obligation to our residents to make sure that we get them from point A to point B, so that we're balancing the interest and doing what you want to do, in other words, with the least impact, whether it be to neighboring landowners, but also, as Commissioner Brost mentioned, relative to the service that's west of this location in Ward 1. So with all that in mind, I'm going to make a motion to postpone for 30 days. And the purpose of the motion to postpone would be consistent with what I just mentioned about getting you from point A to point B, and also limiting the impact to our residents of seeing more specific details relative to the expansion of the current site, on the assumption, and this is key to the motion, that the city would work with you in a significant way relative to setbacks, the well issue, and so forth, and just to see where that stands. And I don't have a foregone conclusion as to where it stands, but based on your answers to questions tonight and the material you've submitted, I think it would be worth seeing that, number one. And number two, specific information relative to the lights that Councilmember Broyles mentioned that would, I think, inevitably be installed over Wild Horse Creek at the new proposed location. And relative to that traffic, and I am not a traffic expert, I'm not an engineer, but there's something in my gut that just tells me getting in and out at that new location on Wild Horse Creek is going to be significantly more of an issue than getting on to the road where the current station is located. And I see Commissioner Beatty affirming that. So I'm pleased to hear what you mentioned, the representative mentioned, relative to if hypothetically you're able to submit something, and again, on the assumption that the city would work with you to the nth degree to make sure it could work for you at the current location, that there would be no disruption because it would be done in phases. I was glad to hear that. But the overall arching purpose of the motion is really, again, to balance the interest of what the district is wanting to do and our residents. There's an existing location. Everyone is used to that. I think there are traffic issues and others, things that could, lighting issues and so forth. We've discussed those that could be presented by the new location. And so if we could just see conclusively whether the existing location could work I would like to know that before I vote on this. And again, on the assumption that the city would work with you as much as possible relative to making that come into being, if that were the case. So that's the motion.
Commissioner Broyles.
I second that motion.
Okay, let's go to a voice vote. All those in favor to postpone for 30 days on Mayor Boland's motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Or postponed for 30 days. So as part of that, Joe, on the transportation, let's make sure that MoDOT will allow that second curb cut, because that may trigger different signalization than what they've seen.
I will contact one of the representatives, Jim Bodard, who does the permitting and review, and ask him that question for the commission. Thank you.
Okay, let me get back to the agenda. Mr. Newberry, are you reading PZ 8-20?
Mr. Chairman.
Mayor Boland.
One thing I forgot to mention, my apology. Thank you. Just as a matter of information, you know, hypothetically, once this comes back to the commission, and if the decision by the district and or the commission or both is ultimately that the existing site would be more accommodative relative to the least disruption to the residents of Wildwood, as well as getting the district from point A to point B. The land that the district has purchased on Wild Horse Creek, I think we would all agree, stands for itself and would in all likelihood not pose any harm to the district relative to a resale or anything of that nature. I forgot to mention that, and I just wanted to make that point known. So thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Newberry.
PZ 8-20, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request to review and consider changes to the lists of permitted uses contained in all R residential, C and M zoning district designations of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance, including the NU non-urban residence district, for the purposes of ensuring the mix of activities are still applicable and suitable for the locations where authorized or allowed. The applicable districts include the following sections of the code. Section 415.090 NU non-urban residence district, section 415.110 R1 1 acre residence district regulations, sections 415.120 R1A residence district regulations, section 415.130 R2 residence district regulations, section 415.140 R3 residence district regulations, section 415.150 R4 residence district regulations, sections 415.160 R6A residence district regulations, section 415.170 C1 neighborhood business district regulations, section 415.180 C2 shopping district regulations, and section 415.200 M1 industrial district regulations, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Department of Planning has prepared for your consideration tonight its information report with recommendation regarding the items that Mr. Newberry just read into tonight's record. The department has prepared a favorable recommendation regarding certain changes to the NU non-urban resident district, the R resident districts, the C1 and C2 commercial districts, and finally, very limited changes to the M1 industrial district. In the report, the department does give background relative to what initiated this particular review. And again, for the purposes of review, it is the Planning and Zoning Commission's work program that was adopted at the end of 2019 for the upcoming year, now 2020. In that work program, this review of the districts and their permitted and conditional uses was identified. As you know, 2 weeks ago, a work session was held by the Planning and Zoning Commission on these particular items. And at that work session, there was a good discussion about the recommended deletions, additions, and certain changes that were being proposed. Overarching all of those, in the analysis of this report, the department does note again that the work session was held, there was good discussion and direction provided. Thereafter, in the analysis, it does note that the intent of the changes are to reflect both historical patterns and current trends. Obviously, as is mentioned and has been mentioned, for many years, video stores were popular and part of almost any commercial center across the region. Nowadays, there are none. And so to retain definitions or identifications of that type in your permitted and conditional uses isn't being nostalgic or historic. It's just reflecting that you're not keeping pace with what's currently happening in the marketplace or in residential settings. Secondly, the non-urban resident district that the city inherited from St. Louis County was very different. St. Louis County treated it as a holding pattern, meaning that there was no specific land use identified with it. It was truly intended to be changed as development approached it, and the pattern was established as each development occurred. In Wildwood, the non-urban is truly now a residential district. So many of the uses that are recommended for deletion reflect what the department believes are more industrial settings, or certainly ones that would nowadays not be consistent with a true residential pattern. Thereafter, the Town Center Update team has been reviewing all of the districts, so to speak, for Town Center area, and they've made some major changes that now are reflected in the permitted and conditional uses. Those changes recommended by the Town Center Update team are recommendations and therefore appropriate for consideration as part of our process. And finally, as the department has noted in the past, it's an opportunity for the city to look at the changing demographic and the way that communities now treat their waste, provide green initiatives to offset traditional forms of energy production. So throughout the code changes that are recommended to the districts, you'll see that we have added solar farms now with landscaping. We've retained hunting and fishing, but made hunting and fishing camps for the general public a conditional use in the non-urban resident district. We've looked at standalone recycling centers in the industrial area of Wildwood. And so I think it's an opportunity for the Planning and Zoning Commission to truly treat Wildwood as the unique place it is by creating additional permitted and conditional uses that are, for the most part, demanded by residents across the country and the St. Louis region. So therefore tonight, as is reflected in attachment B of the information report, the department believes it's captured the suggested changes from the work session by the Planning and Zoning Commission and those that it believe are appropriate based upon input from the Town Center Update team or its day-to-day use of them. Therefore, tonight, the department is respectfully requesting a favorable motion to approve the recommendation so the department can prepare the draft letter of recommendation. Thank you for your attention. And Mr. Newberry, Ms. Arnett, and I are available for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open the floor for discussion or motion. Mayor Boland.
I'm not sure I want to make a motion, but I would just like to mention something, and I'm sure there are divergent opinions on this, but these items, but I think that there is a significant potential concern on the part of our residents with respect to the drive-through requirement in the C2 area. the retention of car washes in C2. And peripherally, and I think Joe's correct with the demographic changes, adult daycare in non-urban and the 1 acre minimum areas might be a great thing, but I guess I'd like to see a little more information on that. So I would make a motion to move forward with the recommendations without the changes for drive-throughs, car washes, or adult daycare pending further discussion and by the commission and resident input, certainly on the drive-through issue.
I have a question for Mayor Boland. And the question would be, would you consider a conditional use permit for those items, which would then be presented to us and then go on to council?
Absolutely. But, and I may be wrong, but as I understand, these are changes that are being proposed that would make it more permissible, if not in fact permissible, for the drive-throughs and the car washes, for example, to occur. And so to your question, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. I would, I mean, a CUP on one of those things, I would be amenable to looking at that, speaking personally, but to make a wholesale change in our code that makes those more permissible at this juncture without resident input to a much larger degree, I would not be in favor of that.
Okay, and then I have to go to Councilman Brost.
Yeah, Joe, on where it says single family and then in parentheses for group home, see definition of single family dwelling. I was looking for the single family dwelling to understand group homes, but I guess, can you just give me an explanation on what that means there?
Yes, sir, Councilmember Bros. Several years ago, at the recommendation of City Attorney John Young, the City of Wildwood held hearings on the group home components, and the definition as presented now in our zoning ordinance is consistent with federal and state law. And for the most part, federal and state law made it easier for group homes to be in residential settings under specific requirements. It's not just an open-ended accommodation. And Mr. Young is on the Zoom call tonight, so he may be able to provide you more detailed explanation.
Like, for example, what would be examples of, say, group homes?
And I will defer to Mr. Young to give his expertise on this issue.
Right, and a group home is that which is expressly defined in the city code, and we drew it from the definition in state statute, which expressly requires the city to include group homes within the definition of single family dwelling. And that definition includes any home in which 8 or fewer unrelated mentally or physically, and again, I'm quoting the statute here, unrelated mentally or physically handicapped persons reside, and may include 2 additional persons acting as house parents or guardians who need to not be related to each other or to any of the mentally or physically handicapped persons residing in the home.
Okay. So group homes is sort of it's a defined term. So, and then Joe, one other one, and again, it seems like this is never going to go away, but the water feature where it talks about water features determined to be high hazard. Is high hazard a defined term?
Yes, and I can provide that to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that determination was made through our review of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources requirements and standards for large water features. So it has to deal with a proximity of home sites from the dam, the height of the dam itself, the volume of water held by the large water feature, etc. So when we came up with the large water features, we spent a great deal of time going over the regulations the state has in place.
Okay, so the water features really maybe better described as large water features. And then you're saying determined to be, say, to be high hazard pursuant to the Missouri. I mean, you're referring to that. Could we add that to it?
We certainly could. We could look at the criteria that would be specifically appropriate and either add it as a definition to the zoning ordinance or parenthetically add it to the use in the list of activities.
Could we refer to the document?
We could, certainly.
That would make more sense. And then if the document changes, we would be up to date.
That's a nice approach. Thank you.
And it's large water features, not just water features. Defined by the state. Is that correct, Joe?
Yes, I'll take a look at that. I thought
okay.
But let me take a look at that and I can certainly make a correction if I've made a mistake, and I'll be glad to.
Mayor Boland.
So my motion, which does not have a second, and that gives me the ability to add to it. So I would add Commissioner Bros 2 items, the water feature and the, I think your other one was the homes. Is that correct, Commissioner Bros?
Well, I'm fine on the group homes. It seems like that has, I guess,
Okay.
a generally accepted defined term on that. I just wasn't aware of that.
And how about the water feature? Are you okay with that, or do you want further discussion on that at this point?
Well, I would like it to state that if it's large water features, and then I do think we need to define what high hazard is, because where else where else in this document do we reference hazard? And I mean, you could have hazard with mulching plants to utilities to dairy farming. You could have hazards on any of them. So why don't we have them on all of them, but we're picking one? So I think we should define that so it's not loosely defined.
Okay, so my motion, Mr. Chairman, would be to move forward with the changes as proposed, with the exception of car washes in C2 zoning, drive-through in C2 zoning, and the water feature issue that Commissioner Broch just mentioned, pending further discussion and resident input.
Commissioner Broyles.
I would just like to add, large is an ambiguous word. And I don't know if we need to put some definite sizes or how much water is expelled from the fountain or the whatever. I think we need to make a differentiation in the size of what that is, rather than either use size or use large. I don't know how to phrase that. But I think maybe there's something in the statutes that say something about water features. I'm not sure.
Commissioner Broyles, within the definition section of the zoning ordinance, we do define large water feature as that which has over an acre of water surface. So anything greater than an acre is a large water feature based upon our definition.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
We still need a second to Mayor Boland's motion. Councilman Brost. Second?
A second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. We'll vote on the motion. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Hopefrey.
Yes.
Commissioner Levitt.
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn.
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Beatty,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Chair Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Boland.
Yes, and Travis, if we could just make certain that the minutes in that motion reflect that as to the waterfall issue that Commissioner Broyles and Brost mentioned, as well as car washes in C2 and drive-throughs in C2 are not affected at this point until further input from residents as the motion directed. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Moving on, we have two correspondence items and under new business.
Real quick,
Sure.
do we have a time frame for the resident input on the car washes and the drive-throughs?
Commissioner Beatty, I suspect it'll be after the first of the year.
Okay.
Just so that everybody's aware, and Mr. Vunich, you can weigh in on this. I think the reason we're doing this is to kind of follow suit with what we're doing in town center, and when that would become back to planning commission for our action and then on to council. So I think delaying this to next year is not a bad thing. Mr. Newberry.
A request for the ongoing operation of an existing telecommunications tower and facility authorized by PZ 4-98 AT&T Wireless Services, Inc., conditional use permit in the NU non-urban residence district, east side of Joe's Way, north of Valley Road, under a 1-year renewal allowed by the existing conditions of the site-specific permit, Ward 2.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as referenced in the report provided to you tonight for this particular item, this particular telecommunications facility has been located in the city since approximately 1998. The conditions associated with the facility do require reviews. The first was a 5-year cycle and thereafter annual types. As you know, this particular site has had a mixed record of maintenance, but through those annual reviews, the city was able to ensure that each year the dead plantings were replaced, the site was cleaned up, and now, since the ownership has changed to Crown Castle, those issues have seemed to be lessened, if not eliminated. A site inspection conducted by the Department of Planning indicated the new plantings placed last year at the request of the Planning and Zoning Commission have thrived and are alive, and the general site condition is satisfactory. Based upon that, the department is recommending that the conditional use permit be extended for 1 more year. I do want to mention that there is a factor that needs to be identified for the benefit of the commission members. Recently, there was some confusion about the number of exterior arrays that could be placed on the tower. That confusion led to an additional array being added to the exterior of the tower, which exceeds the limits of the conditional use permit. The department is aware of this. Crown Castle, the owner of the tower, is aware of it, and both parties are working toward a resolution, which will include this Planning and Zoning Commission. This error, which is both in part to the Department of Planning, should not delay the renewal of the tower in its opinion. The reason being is the tower does provide service that is necessary in this area, which is partially rural and lacks in some regards better access to high-speed internet. So therefore, the department wants to recognize that there will be a modification request to the permit, but until such time, the use of the tower should be authorized by the city. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, the department will be available for any comments or questions, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I'll open for a motion on the item, or if there are any discussion points.
I'll move to support the department's recommendation.
Commissioner Beatty, I'll need a second.
Second.
Commissioner Levitt, second. Seeing no hands for discussion, we'll do a roll call vote on this one. Mr. Newberry.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Beatty,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Levitt,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn,
Yes.
Chair Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Bolin.
Thank you. It's approved 9-0.
Okay, moving on to item number 2, Mr. Newberry.
Well, I'm playing Mr. Newberry
Oh,
tonight
Mr.
on this
Vunich.
one, so please call me Travis. A request for the ongoing operation of an existing telecommunication tower and facility authorized by PZ 25-97 Sprint Spectrum LP Marinus Retreat Center. Conditional use permit, CUP in the NU non-urban resident district, east side of State Route 109, south of Old State Road, under a 1-year renewal allowed by the existing conditions of the site-specific permit. This particular location is located in Ward 6.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mr. Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. This item is similar to the previous item. This is another telecommunications tower that is located at the Marinus Retreat Center that was authorized also in 1998 and has required, after a 5-year period that concluded in 2003, annual renewals of the tower and the facility. The department, in reviewing this renewal, conducted a site visit and found the site to be in generally very good condition. The department did identify that the retaining wall, the masonry wall around the equipment facility has become soiled, is dirty, and has what appears to be mold on it. And the department is recommending approval of this annual renewal for this facility, conditioned upon the cleaning of the masonry wall around the facility. And with that, the department will conclude its presentation and is available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. I'll open the floor up for discussion, or we'll vote on this one as well. I will need a motion. Commissioner Cohn.
The motion to approve as recommended by the Department of Planning.
Councilman Brost.
Yeah. Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Newberry, roll call vote.
Commissioner Beatty,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Humphrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Levitt,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyles,
Yes.
Chair Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Bolin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Vunich.
Thank you for your action on both of those telecommunication tower. I do want to note that in the chat feature associated with the Zoom call, Dr. Remy, who represents Ward 3, had some concerns about the AT&T tower. In his chat, it says, I was hoping to offer a comment in regards to numerous complaints I received on drop service on Strecker between Shepherd and Kerrs Mill Road. I spoke extensively with Chris Pickle from AT&T, who said they don't have a plan to increase signal. No was recommending against approval until addressed. Unfortunately, everybody voted already as my hand was in a raised fashion. What I would suggest to the commission is not to change your vote, but the department will hold the receipt and filing for up to 2 weeks so as it can contact the representative from AT&T and have an explanation provided both to Dr. Remy and the City Council, but also the Planning and Zoning Commission. Therefore, your action on the Joe's Way site would not be received and filed by the City Council till the earliest, which would be November 23rd. And if that's acceptable, that's how I would like to proceed to address Dr. Remy, the council person from Ward 3's request.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Beatty.
Yeah, I agree. My only question was, I mean, being that the owner is Crown Castle rather than AT&T, aren't we kind of picking on one entity that doesn't necessarily deserve it based on the actions of another?
Well, certainly, but I guess the point being is that Crown Castle may be the vehicle that ultimately allows for better service, meaning that they own the tower. There is a restriction on the height, and there's always been that kind of push or pull associated with the height of these facilities. Initially, no one wanted to see them, and the city was responding to input from residents, and so it limited the height of towers to the minimum necessary to achieve what would be acceptable service. So I guess I just want to kind of circle the wagons with AT&T, see what they have to say if there's other approaches, and then kind of at least let you know. All we're doing is that the tower isn't going to be removed in the 2-week delay, but it'll give us an opportunity to at least say, you know, Crown Castle's waiting on you as much as the city is.
Mr. Vunich, Kathy had a chat discussion item. Maybe we should bring her in.
Certainly.
I was just noting that Mr. Peckins is on the call and he is with Crown Castle. He's the petitioner this evening. So if anyone had a question or maybe if he could shed some light on some of that. Thank you. I just wanted you all to know he was there.
Dr. Remy, you're on mute.
Actually, this is the representative from Crown Castle, the owner of the tower facility.
He's on mute.
Does Kathy need to unmute him?
No, I don't need you anything. Mr. Peckins, we're unable to hear you. I don't know if your volume is up or if your microphone is connected to the correct source on Zoom.
We can't hear you.
On Zoom, down on the bottom left, there's an arrow by the mute microphone, an up arrow. And if you hit that, you may need to just select a different microphone. Now give that a, yeah. Now you're muted.
He's connected now to audio. If you just select the unmute button, you should be fine now. I saw it come up.
All right,
There you go.
one more try. Fantastic. Here, I'm in the telecommunication business and I can't even work a Zoom call. Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate everybody working with us this evening. One thing that I would ask you to consider when it comes to coverage and capacity from a carrier perspective, when you have these type of towers with what we call the flush mount antennas, one antenna per sector, that really limits the carrier's coverage and capacity of an area. So when it goes to that full sector array, that triangle platform of a structure, it allows them to put more antennas up, therefore gaining more gain in both of those features. So I certainly don't want to speak for AT&T, but I would ask you all to consider that. If that's something that you would look at for this type of structure, that may be a good common ground between providing that coverage, but also then trying to meet the needs of your residents and the carriers, right? That the investment to put another tower within the next kind of service cell is an extremely expensive investment for those folks. So it's kind of the balance there. And I know AT&T will give you some feedback and we're happy to participate in that dialogue, but maybe that's a consideration that's a workable fix for everybody.
To the representative of Crown Castle, thank you for that suggestion, and maybe the short delay just in terms of receipt and filing by City Council of the action of the Planning and Zoning Commission will allow the department to ask AT&T what would make the signal better. And if there is a solution, then AT&T and Crown Castle can work together toward achieving it.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Boland?
I guess just an option here, if there's no exigency to this, would be to postpone this for 2 weeks to get an answer to that. And if that's the case, I would make a motion to that effect.
Well,
I don't
the matter had already
owning
been
it actually will do anything. Because they're going to come back, right, on this tower anyway?
Yes, due to the error, this one will come back in a short period of time to address that. And certainly at that time, we can then move forward with the discussion about actual coverage associated with this. And if there is an improvement to coverage that can come from this tower facility in that specific area.
Okay, then no motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your input. That concludes our scheduled items. Mr. Vunich, any closing remarks?
Just thank you all for your service. We do appreciate it very much. And good luck at the polls tomorrow.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Commissioner Beatty, I need a second. Councilman Brost. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right.